Welcome to another episode of Rose Resource Room. Today, I am super excited to talk to my guest, Callie Chaplow. Hey, Callie. So I know we're in for a treat for so many reasons. Like we've been having tech issues, like all the things. And my husband is working on something upstairs with electricity. So at one point I was on Zoom and I'm like, wait, why am I not connected? He's like, oh, I just turned that off. I was like, oh. So then I switched over to my hotspot and I just know that anytime that kind of happens, the enemy is upset about what's going to happen. So I know it's going to be an
Amen.
amazing time. Callie, thank you for being on the show.
Amen. Thank you. I'm
My pleasure. So
excited to talk to
thank you. So give us a little bit about yourself, like before you became a mom, like what was life like, and then becoming a mom, and then even deciding to homeschool. What does that all look like?
you. Okay. Excuse me. So let's see. Before I became a mom, I was a legislative aide for a state delegate in Virginia. So that's what we call our House members in Virginia, or the House of Delegates. And he was a very pro homeschool, conservative all around member. And I was young. I was 19, I think, when I started volunteering, 20 when I started working for him. And really privileged to get the job at that age, to be honest. Um, and then I ended up meeting my then husband through politics and political involvement at that time. And we became fast friends once we were down in Richmond, away from home, and ended up getting engaged, I think, that summer, and then married. And then I had my first baby when I was 20. I had barely 24. So I was still working then. I was still working full time as legislative aide. And, my heart was so torn because I just wanted to be home with my baby. But I was also really invested in the work I was doing. I'm somebody who's driven by, passion, not so much money. And so I was really passionate about what I was doing. And we did a lot of, and that was my first exposure to HEAV, to Home Educators Association of Virginia, who I now work for. So we used to carry legislation for them. My boss loved the organization, loved my predecessor, Yvonne Bunn, loved Ann Miller, our president. We would go to the convention before I ever was married or had kids. I attended the convention. And so I had benevolence toward homeschooling, but I went to public school. So it was a little bit foreign to me. The people I had met before working for him who were homeschooled were great. Um, but then after working with him and really, we had so many homeschool volunteers going to the convention.
I wanted you to talk a little bit about homeschool freedom because I think theoretically and intellectually, everyone understands the importance of freedom, everyone understands the importance of parental rights, but we also don't understand that we need to fight for it because freedom is unfortunately not free. So, can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
the importance of homeschool freedom, what you do in your daily role to keep Virginia free, and maybe any potential or past threats that you've had to deal with?
Sure. Yeah. Um, so yeah, definitely what you said. I, I repeated a lot this legislative session. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And, we as homeschoolers, we just want to be at our living room table. We don't want to bother anybody else. We don't want anybody else to bother us. But there are people who have a fundamentally different view of parenthood and the world than we do, especially we as Christians, but lots of other people of faith, and even people who observe natural law around them. And there's a movement afoot gaining momentum, seemingly, that they believe the government has authority before the parent in overseeing, nurturing, and raising the children. That we don't see that in nature. We haven't seen that in human history. When we look back at human history, it's a relatively new idea. And it's, our country was founded on religious liberty. And part of that is our right as parents. And compulsory attendance laws started passing, you know, just over 100 years ago. In fact, we're right now celebrating Pierce versus the Society of Sisters, which is a landmark Supreme Court case that said children, are not own. I was just about to say it, not in mere possession of the state. I was just about to say the exact quote. Now it escaped me, but it was a landmark case 100 years ago that clarified into case law what we can naturally observe. When you go to the hospital and have a baby, nobody questions you naming your child. Nobody questions you taking your child home. But suddenly, at some point, there's this transition where some people have this philosophy that now I get to question you as a mom. But parents, generally speaking, there are exceptions to every rule, but generally speaking, parents love their children more than anybody else possibly can. And they will do anything to meet their needs. So, from the outside, I think a lot of people don't understand the drive to seek the resources that you need or your child may need, given their different situation. So we've seen in Virginia, we saw a pretty bad legislative attack. It was Senate Bill 1031, and it basically would have stripped Virginia's religious exemption law completely. And our religious exemption law predates the legalization of homeschooling in Virginia. The legislation that enabled it was actually introduced and passed by a Democrat. He ended up being the first Black governor of Virginia. He ended up being a mayor of Richmond. And so this is not this should be, rather, misspoke. This should be a bipartisan issue. This is about, a parent's right to choose what is best for their children. But the senator who introduced this is a former member of the Fairfax County School Board. And both the Fairfax County School Board and where I live, the Loudoun County School Board, are in the news a lot for, encroaching or trying to overstep parents' rights. And so she came forward and introduced this bill to strip religious exemption. And from the get-go, because I've been involved in policy and politics, and I even grew up talking world affairs at the table. These types of attacks are never just one and done. It's always a slippery slope. It's always a chipping away at your liberties and your freedom. And so, at the beginning of this battle, we had some people saying, well, what's the big deal? Just do some paperwork. It basically would have taken religious exemption and put it to where you had to comply with everything you do with home instruction. But the way our law is you're saying you're not accountable to the government because of, your religious faith. And so it is a big deal. It's why our nation was founded. And so we said, no, this an attack on any parental rights with regard to, home instruction, religious exemption is an attack on all of us. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. The bill, expanded and ballooned and ducked and dodged. But I have to tell you, I am so proud of the parents here in Virginia because they rose up. I kept hearing stories of moms who had never called a legislator, never tracked a bill, had no clue how a bill becomes law. I mean, these are intelligent people, but we all have our different, not everybody is like me and is like a total nerd for the legislative process. I'm not good at poetry. So there's, but oh my word, by the thousands, these parents engaged, they got their kids involved. They were coming down to the Capitol. They were speaking to their legislators. And it made an impression. I got word that the House Speaker, and this was, hearsay, just to clear that he didn't want to see the bill coming over to the House because the House is up for election this year, and he didn't want
Mhm.
his House members on record, voting against it.
Against,
But
yeah.
yeah, yeah, and so that's been a good lesson. And about 42, the homeschool numbers in Virginia since COVID have increased about 42%. So that's a lot of people who have just taken homeschooling as a given. It's just
Yeah.
something I can do. And
Yeah.
now we have the internet and social media and so many co-ops and education models. You can really do anything to meet your kids' needs. But the idea of protecting that right is brand new to folks who are new to homeschooling. So hopefully, and then we had, after us, we had the attack in Illinois. We've seen them in several other states. And
Yeah.
so in Pennsylvania, and I know you're going to be going to their convention soon. I think I
Yes.
heard
Hmm.
um they have a lot of battles there. And I know you guys you live in New Jersey though, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So I'm sure you guys want to protect what you have
Yeah, that's the
and
thing. Like a lot of
not,
people think, oh,
yeah,
the regulation is low, you don't have to do anything. No, you want to be proactive in making sure that nothing comes down the pipeline.
that's exactly right. You have to always be vigilant,
Yeah.
and proactive and aware. And, part of that comes, one of the things I'm really working on now, and one of the things I'll be speaking, our convention starts this Thursday down
Yeah.
in Richmond. I'm so excited. and and one of the things I'll be talking about is, you know, your phone call down to your delegate or senator's office is so much more powerful if you've called them before, if they've seen your
Mm,
family's face before, if because I mean, when a bill is introduced like this and you're not familiar with homeschooling, it's kind of like this philosophical idea of
right.
homeschooling, right? But on the other side, they can show, a few sample cases where there has been abuse or educational neglect, which is horrible.
Right.
Nobody condones that. We pray for those children. We have laws that prohibit that, and direct social service intervention, and those laws should be utilized. But that is really the exception. In fact, most people choose to homeschool for safety reasons
That's
now.
right.
The primary reason people choose to homeschool. And so right now, when we're off session, is when you need to call up your delegate or senator and say,
Hmm.
can we bring you cookies, or
Hmm.
will you come to our homeschool graduation ceremony, or will you come to visit us at Awana's, or at Trail Life, or
Right.
AHG, or our running club. It could be anything. It could be, do you want to meet us for Chick-fil-A,
Mhm.
or do you want to come teach a civics lesson?
I
Or
love
it can be
that.
anything. And it's because then, rather than this philosophical idea, they now have, you know, scrumptious little faces like your kids. Um, or, and they see, oh, wow, this is a really beautiful family. This is really
Mm,
nice. And then it is harder to then go chisel away at those freedoms that you want to protect. And so, people are relationships. We're all made in the image of our creator and the image of God, and we're made to be relational. And so politicians are people too.
that's right. That's right. Oh, I love that. I think what you shared just kind of took away some of the intimidation that people may feel like, oh, I don't want to talk to an elected official. And I'm like, well, even if you didn't elect them, they still work for you, right? So I think it's just humanizing and
Yes.
normalizing these kind of conversations. And I also love the piece where you talked about just invite them somewhere or share something with them because a lot of times we don't engage civically until something goes wrong. And then like everyone is at the town
Yes.
hall, right? So
Yeah. I mean, that is our nature, right? If we go stay at a hotel, if everything's right, we don't call. If something goes wrong, we call. I mean, it's just our nature, but you're right. And and I'm glad you brought up intimidation, because there I had this moment that broke my heart when we were down in Richmond this past legislative session. I said, "Oh, well, while you're here," I was talking to a dad after a committee. I said, "While you're here, you should go up and see your legislator." He said, "I can't do that. I'm not a lobbyist." And I went, "Oh, no, no, no. This is your house.
We the
You know,
people.
that's right. You own this place just as much as I do." And to be honest, it can be intimidating if they are maybe of the opposite political persuasion, but they there really is, they're cordial and they want your votes, right? And it is really the most all the time they're very nice, and oftentimes you're going to talk to a legislative aide or a staffer or somebody like that,
Yeah.
the first time, and maybe you're just dropping off like a little story your kids wrote with a family picture or something, but it really is the exception that the experience is not pleasant. They want your vote,
They
so
do. Yeah. And a lot of times we think that they know everything, and not to take away from their expertise or their experience, but sometimes you're the expert on something, right? Like it's hard for one person to know everything about the
yes.
environment, food, wellness, homeschooling, right? So when you go in and you say, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know XYZ," and you share that perspective, you just did free research for them. So it's actually really helpful.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That is a really important point. It is true. They can only have an expertise in so much, and you're helping them, and you're now a resource for them. It's
That's
a
right.
really good point. Really
Yeah.
valuable.
So back to your point, relationship. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, Callie, you are such a wealth of information. Like you're the expert on everything.
No.
What would you want to share with a homeschooler or someone who is thinking about homeschool, and going back to your intro when you said, I just felt like I couldn't do it all, or
Mhm.
kind of that thought process. What would you say to someone like that?
Um, I would say, I think in retrospect, one of the most valuable things I did is where I said I looked around and I observed the types of families that I wanted to build, and I gravitated toward them, and I asked them to lead me, to shepherd me. Will you show me how you do this? Will you show me how
Mhm.
you do this? And so that takes, it's a little scary, but you really want to surround yourself with the types of people that you want to be like, the types of children, observe the types of children you want your children to be like. um and and one thing that took me way too long to learn is to ask for help. you know as a mom, I don't know if it's the same for you, but when somebody asks me for help and I'm in a position to help them, I feel like it's a gift. I'm like, oh yay, I get to be useful, helpful, like, but why won't we ask others then? It's so hard. And so tried to get better at allowing others to help me.
It's really, really tough because I feel both sides. Like on one end, it's like, oh, I don't want to burden the person. They already have so much on their plate. I don't want to ask for help. But then I hear what you're saying. Like when I get asked, I'm like, of course. Like, why didn't I think about offering? So I definitely hear what you're saying. Thank you for sharing that perspective, Callie.
Yeah.
You are so
And I mean,
amazing.
when we read like, oh,
No, tell me when we read. Go
oh yeah,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, when we read, like Acts, Acts the Apostles, like when Jesus's disciples like first go out on their own after ascension, they pull everything together and they rely on one another. I think we have this like American rugged individualism, um, but we are made to commune. Um, but I struggle with it myself, so don't get me wrong.
No, no, I hear you. But I feel like you just kind of nailed down what it is. It's that like if you're from a collective society or a collective culture, it's easy or it's even your norm. Like you're
Yes,
expected to ask for help, or people are expected to kind of like do things together. But you hear things in the culture like, oh, bootstrap and pull yourself up. So then it's
yes.
almost a sign of weakness to ask for help.
Yes. And I mean, we are such a, a disjointed culture, in many ways. We don't have generational living,
Mhm.
like most of human history and most of the world has. And I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about homeschooling too. I mean, the idea of segregating people by the year they were born and putting them into a room based on that is really a new idea. And
Yeah.
it's really a strange idea when you think about it in the course of, you need to be around old people and young people and people of varying, cultures and intelligence levels and gifts and talents and interests. And
I'm glad you
um,
brought that up, Callie, because we were texting about that too. Why is that important? Like, why? So first, why did we even start the interage community? And like, why is it important to be with intergenerational communities?
so the idea of putting everybody by a birth year into a room together, um, John Dewey discovered, and he's more of a pioneer of higher education, but he discovered that if you take a group of kids, I think it was 30 to 40, and what he said, it's been a bit since I've read it, and put them in together, kids of the same year of birth together for a year, you actually psychologically decouple their parent reliance and it's replaced with peer reliance. And that's unnatural. Mammals, all mammals, but humans in particular, our brain isn't fully developed till we're like 25. We need our parents, um and we need to care for the younger ones. That's how we learn, to become parents. Care for the older ones. The older ones impart so much wisdom to us. um it's so quick that this, a new philosophy becomes viewed as the norm, but it's not normal.
Yeah, and I saw the research. It's even something where, say, for example, you have five kids. The oldest one, instead of being the intellectual genius who then allows everyone to raise to his standards, he actually diminishes his vocabulary and his intellect to the lowest age kid. And I'm like, so this is what we're striving for?
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean it's and we're seeing that play out with um our kids are later and later and later prepared for launch, later and later and later prepared for adulthood. I mean, the next county over in Maryland, I remember a family being prosecuted for their 12-year-old being out. I was a nanny when I was 12 for three kids. And I walked to school by myself at age 6. And I've been reading a lot of books lately about this, different, books about, how electronics and social media are influencing kids, but, even older books. And, um, when we deprive our kids of their opportunities to be independent or to lead, um, they end up being, they don't develop the confidence knowing that they can figure it out if something goes wrong or if they fail. Um,
No, you're completely right.
we can see it's not going well.
I know. It's so sad. And like you said, like, how did this become a norm so quickly, and why isn't anyone questioning this status quo?
I would love to know that. I mean, if I had all the time in the world, I would ask. I really, I don't understand. Um, I don't understand how, why we don't, why we're, maybe because we're having fewer children, we're so afraid of them skinning their knee or something. It almost, everything has to be perfect, but the world is not
Yeah.
perfect. And then, kids just don't have the same resilience as when they go play in the mud and skin their knees and, you know get a boo boo or I mean, you know it's I live kind of in a rural area, and I've loved getting to watch my kids, climb trees. And
Hmm.
we did have a broken wrist once, but not bad for four boys.
I know. I have three boys, you know that, so
Yep.
understood. No, I really appreciate it. And I think a part of it is that we don't have time to think. We're so busy. And like you said, there is this perfectionism culture of everything has to be perfect, so we can't take a chance. But because like even for me, I had my kids in public school and I never thought about, in fact, I did think about it. My plan was, okay, find the best neighborhood, pay the most amazing taxes, and then, get good school. And you never really think about it. I wasn't introduced to homeschool at a young age, or like I never knew any homeschoolers, so I never thought of it. It was just this is what you do. You get
Yep.
married, you have children, you put your kids in school, you go to work. That's literally, but you don't think about wait. But years ago, that's not what they did. No one thinks about that.
Yeah. And now that's even been changed. Now it's, you know, you get married and then you work a whole
That's
career
right.
and wait and,
That's right.
and that presents a whole, you know, you know, a lot of other troubles. I mean, you have to wait until the Lord calls you to children, but we can only have children for so long as women. Our bodies are only made to have children for so long. And by the time, we're 30, that it's in half. But I'm in my 40s and I am still super energetic and loving, just starting this like whole new career, and my kids
Yeah.
are almost grown. And um I had listened to this interesting podcast a couple of years ago, and it was about the speaker, and I think he was doing a documentary called this epidemic of unplanned childlessness. And
Interesting.
he talked a lot about Korea and what's happening there, and throughout the world. Um, but I think he was probably a sociologist of some sort, but he was kind of saying how ideally you could kind of flip the way, because we as women live longer, we have energy later. Like if we could flip things. I mean, obviously you can't do that, but um, and you really do, it want to be in a stable environment, in a stable, loving environment, in a wholesome marriage, and have stability for your children. So um, you have to wait for that to happen.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing, Callie. Listen, for anyone who's listening, there's so many themes and so many nuggets and so many gems that you can pick up. I mean, the overarching one is that God is good and he's faithful, and we already know that. Trust God, follow your passion, understand that you can start or restart at any age, at any stage. So if you've always wanted to learn to play the drums or the piano, it is not too late. You can actually redeem your education as a part of your homeschooling journey, right?
Right.
Like Cal and I didn't know Latin, but now we're here talking about declensions and, first, second, this and that. We knew about conjugations in Spanish, but declensions were new.
Right.
But I say all that to say, freedom is not free. You have to fight for it. You have to keep it at the forefront. And like Callie said, it's all about eternal vigilance. So I just want to thank you so, so much for being
Yeah.
on the show today and sharing all your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I love how you share your energy and passion. And I know that your kids are going to pick up on that too.
Oh, I
An
appreciate
amazing
that.
mama.
Thank you, Callie.
All right.